The FCS playoffs week 2, a solid 2-1 week last week for the selections. We had North Dakota minus 6.5 over Missouri. They won that game 44-10. We did have Eastern Washington plus 7.5 against North Dakota State. I think they jumped out to like a 20-3 lead or 17-3, something like that. But North Dakota State came back and beat them. And then we had Jacksonville State minus 21 over Davidson, a 49-14 winner. So 3 selections last week, 2-1. I got 2 more selections for you this week. Only 5 games, but I do have 2 selections for you. But we will go over all the games. And once again, the purpose of the Phil Steele Plus tour is take you around the Phil Steele Plus a little bit, show you what we have available. We're sort of focusing on the FCS. I could show you that on the FBS team pages. Might as well go to Alabama, for example. If you click on the last 40 years' results, you get every spread on every game we'll have 2020 in, by the way, like in the next month or so. But it'll take you all the way back to 1976. You want to know a spread from any game between now and 1976? That's 45 years, basically. It's right here at your fingertips. And we started putting right over here in 2003, we started using 2003, we started using the over-unders because they started becoming available on every game. Back in like 2001, if you're too young to remember, 2001 they had, or weren't gambling at the time, they had over-unders on maybe a handful of games during the year. They were trying them out. Here they became on every game, and that's when we started charting them on every single game. And the next year we started putting in halftimes. 2004, we have halftimes on every single game. So you could tell what the score was at the half right here, and this is what the final score was of the game. So that's all the way back to 1976. Also on these pages, they take you all the way back to color-coded red and green back to 2010, complete individual player stats in each and every year. You also get the drafts coming up, guys. If you want to check out the draft tonight, here's every player drafted from every team, including 2020. And when I say every player ever drafted, look, we're taking it back to 1936. So the draft is tonight. You want to check out how many first-round draft picks teams have had. It's available on every single team. Just click right here in Draft History when you get the full Phil Steele Plus. Individual player stats, that takes you game by game. You can see Najee Harris really came on strong down the stretch here, finished with 1,466 yards. You could see that Jalen Waddle was actually the team's leading receiver after 4 games, then got injured. Then Devontae Smith, the Heisman Trophy winner, took over and became it. He was just the number 2 receiver at this point. All that is at your fingertips on every team in the FBS. Start charts as well. Complete start chart for the team. We'll have that color-coded to show starts lost to injury. That should be updated in the next month or so as well. NFL team pages, if you're playing around with the draft tonight, it's in Cleveland, by the way. Welcome to Cleveland if you're come to Cleveland for the draft. If not, watching on TV. I hope you enjoy it. Naturally, it was beautiful and sunny yesterday. It was 76 degrees in Cleveland yesterday. So naturally, here we are in the national spotlight. I look out the window right now. It is rainy. It's supposed to be about 55 degrees. So we're going to have wonderful weather for the draft to show you our fair city. But the NFL goes all the way back. Same thing, color-coded green and red. Individual player stats are right here on every single game. That helps you fantasy guys out. You can see how the players did against different teams all the way through. But we're going to focus on the FCS today. And the first game we're going to look at is Southern Illinois against South Dakota State. South Dakota State, the number 1 seed in the FCS playoffs. And as you can see right here, they are the number 1 team in our average game grade. Now, the average game grade we have in the NFL, we have it in the FBS, we have it in the FCS, not only takes into account the score of the game, but also the yards and, most importantly, the opponent in the game. So as you see here, they beat Holy Cross 31-3 in the playoff. They only beat North Dakota State by 10. However, even though they had a 241-yard edge here and a 208-yard edge here, it takes into account the strength of opponent. North Dakota State, a lot tougher opponent, and they played them on the road. That graded a 96.7 game grade. Last week's game against Holy Cross, remember what I said? It could have been a look ahead. I said they had the mismatch standard. You wondered what they'd be like coming off of North Dakota State. Yeah, they beat Holy Cross last week, right around the spread. It was 24.5. They won the game by 28, 31-3. And that only earned an 80 grade, but they still remain number 1 at 84.0. Southern Illinois last week beat Weber State. It was a close one. They were actually outgained. They gave up 443 yards. And I guess the one thing I want to focus on here would probably be the defense over the last 4 weeks. Their defense, right down here, you see the last 4 weeks? The last 4 weeks capture all that, and it shows that they're allowing 456 yards per game, 4.7 yards per carry, 68% completions the last 4 weeks. And they've only taken out Weber State, Southeast Louisiana. Well, they have taken out South Dakota State. And interesting, they played South Dakota State, so we'll get to that in a minute. Meanwhile, South Dakota State the last 4 weeks only allowing 227 yards per game. So they've got a much better defense, especially the last 4 weeks. It really shows up. You see the red numbers down here. You see the green numbers over here. A big edge on defense to South Dakota State. And we can see here that they played Southern Illinois at Southern Illinois in Week 5. Now, Southern Illinois was coming off a win over Northern Iowa. They were 4-1 at the time. Looked like a showdown game. They got crushed. Let's make sure all their players were there. So pull over here. We see that for Northern Iowa, it looks like Nick Baker was their quarterback. Baker probably started this game, got injured, so Stone Labanowitz was in. And Stone Labanowitz's first start would have been this South Dakota State game. So that's interesting. I didn't realize that about Southern Illinois, but that's a beautiful thing. We're both learning about these teams as we go. You learn about every single team, FBS, FCS, NFL, however you want. You can just study these teams and get all this in depth. So look at that. We found out why they lost that first game. Nick Baker must have got injured here because he didn't play anymore. Stone took over, and in his first start, they got whipped by South Dakota State. Now, they played better football since then. They did lose again to Missouri State, but then they beat Southeast Louisiana by 7, and they beat Weber State by 3. So really not an overall powering game. They did beat North Dakota State 38-14, but remember, that was with Nick Baker at quarterback. Stone is hitting 73% with a 7-2 ratio. The numbers are good, but for some reason they're just not producing the same, although they did have 55 points here and 807 yards. I guess my key here is the run defense. They have both teams like to run the ball. They're 240, 193. Their run defense, a lot of red, 5 yards per carry. Their run defense, a lot of green, very good, 3.5. I like South Dakota State. However, they're laying 15.5. My computer has them winning 38-19. If you look here, 84 plus the home field edge, let's call it 87. This is 71.9. Vegas put it right where the average game grades have it. If you take the average game grades, that's right where Vegas put it. So I'd probably lean with South Dakota State just for the fact that they blew them out here, and they have been playing much better defense, but that's not one of the top plays this week. I'll get you 2 top plays this week. All right, let's take a look at North Dakota State. How unusual is it that the number 2 seed in this North Dakota State-Sam Houston State game is Sam Houston State? It's not North Dakota State. I mentioned to you last week that North Dakota State was not the North Dakota State team of years past. These teams were running for 288 yards per game. They came into last week averaging about 208 yards per game. Well, they took on Eastern Washington. They ran the football. They ran the football well. Let me just take a look. I think Eastern Washington had a weaker rush defense. I think that was my main concern on that game. Let's double-check that. Yes, look at what Eastern Washington's rush D did down the stretch. Now let's take a look at Sam Houston's rush D. And that would make me think that they have a better shot of containing them. This is what they're allowing on the year. That's pretty doggone good. 59 yards per game, 1.8 yards per carry. Strength against strength. Sam Houston is living on the rush defense. North Dakota State's living on the run game. In fact, if you look at the red here, the losses, they were held to 109 yards. They were held to 97 yards by South Dakota State. Those were their 2 losses this year, their 2 lowest rushing games. This is a very good rush defense. Now, North Dakota State has very good defense. Holding opponents 305 yards per game. They've got the defensive edge. Sam Houston's got a little bit of an offensive edge, and they've got a veteran quarterback in Eric Schmid. Last year he hit 59% with a 12-5 ratio. This year he's hitting 61% with a 15-7 ratio. So Sam Houston State's a good team. They barely got past Monmouth last week. And one thing I like to look at is the stats from the game. North Dakota State outgained Eastern Washington by 165 yards. Meanwhile, Sam Houston State was outgained last week by 141 yards. So that would have me leaning with the defending champs. It seems like the light's gone on. My computer calls North Dakota State to go on the road and win this one 23-18. The average game grade says they are slightly the better team, but with the home edge, a slight lean to Sam Houston. And I'm a little concerned about that Sam Houston rush defense. So I'm leaning with North Dakota State, but I'm not going to make that one of the official plays. So let's get to your third game now. North Dakota against James Madison. North Dakota delivered for us last week. My main reservation was the fact they hadn't played in weeks. Didn't matter. They blew out Missouri State last week, 44-14. Wasn't close. They were up way big at the half. Very comfortable game if you were following along. If you watched that one, you saw they pretty much dominated the game. Now, James Madison, I talked to you last week about their defense. I told you that they had the best defense in the FCS 2 years ago. They had the best defense coming into last week's game. Little annoyed that they gave up 403 yards to VMI last week. That surprised me. 21 first downs, 403 yards. They only had a 22-21 first down edge. Now, they did lead. They were up by 14 or 17 at the half. They were up by 14 late. VMI got the late score. So there is some garbage yards involved here, but it wasn't your normal shutdown James Madison defense that it was before. Let's see what North Dakota State's players did last week. Tommy Schuster hit 8 of 13 for 223 yards, and Otis Way rushed for 64. Not an overpowering game at all. They only had 17 first. Well, yeah, they had the 364, 185-yard edge, so they did dominate that game. But James Madison's a team that I love that defense, and I love their playoff. The fact that they've been in the playoffs before, they made it all the way to the championship game. Coming into this one, James Madison's only laying 2.5. My computer's got James Madison winning this one 28-22. My main concern would be right here, and then the other concern would be the fact that my average game grades actually have North Dakota, the number 2 team in the country, and James Madison, number 8. So that would be a little bit of a concern as well. I lean with James Madison, laying the 2.5, but that's not one of your official plays. So let's get to your 2 official plays for the week. And we're going to look at the Jacksonville State game. They are hosting Delaware. Click Delaware up over here. Come on, Delaware. There they are, the Delaware Blue Hens and Jacksonville State. Now, Jacksonville State, I remember prepping for them prior to them playing Florida State. They have a talented team. Zarek Cooper did come back, but Zarek Cooper, as I told you last week, left. He opted out right here, and so they ended up going with Zion Webb, who had played last year. Webb's having a pretty good season. They're doing okay. Webb's hitting 59% with a 13-8 ratio. Zarek Cooper last year had a 28-12 ratio, 59%. So that's pretty good for the offense. They got 2 good running backs. Delaware struggled last week against Sacred Heart. How about 199 yards offense? Their defense played well, but they really haven't played it looks like they haven't played any playoff teams. Maine, Stony Brook, Rhode Island, Delaware State, Villanova, Sacred Heart. Meanwhile, these guys did play Florida State. I don't know if they played any other playoff teams. Southeast Missouri State they did play. Other than that, they haven't. But they beat FIU on the road by 9. They beat Davidson last week for us. Very comfortable game. They won that one 49-14. They have an average game grade of 75.7 to their 74.2. That makes it close, and Vegas has it close. They have Jacksonville State at 3.5. However, my computer's got Jacksonville State winning the game by 8. Shows them with the 368 to 220-yard edge, so I like that. I like the fact that they've played Florida State, FIU already. They've played Southeast Missouri State, so they've basically played what you could say is 3 playoff teams versus none over here. And I like the fact that they dominated their game last week, plus 200 yards. They were outgained by 37 yards. And offensively, they really struggled. I mean, 88 yards rushing the last 2 weeks. They haven't even topped 100 yards rushing, and they're not throwing the football well. You're only laying 3.5. You're at home. I'm going to have to go with Jacksonville State in that one. Minus the 3.5 over Delaware. So that's an official play, 2-1. Let's hope that makes it 3-1. And the final one we're going to look at, we're going to go SWAC. We're going to look at Alabama A&M, Arkansas Pine Bluff. And I did look at these last night, took a brief glance at them, and couple things jumped out to me on this game, which made it to me a play. Now, it's at a neutral site, so there's no home field edge. First of all, this team's graded at a 67.7. That is Alabama A&M. And this team over here, Arkansas Pine Bluff, is graded at a 55.6. So that would say Alabama A&M winning the game by about 12. My computer's got Alabama A&M winning the game by 2. By 2. So it does say it's going to be close. But when I looked at it a little bit closer, they've all played SWAC teams, but they haven't really played. They haven't played the same team. However, they took on Jackson State. Man, I'll tell you this: when I was going through every single FBS team and looking at the transfer portal, I can't tell you the amount of FBS guys that transferred to Jackson State. And they took on an undefeated Jackson State team and beat them with a 533, 463-yard edge. They are plus 131 yards per game. Meanwhile, if you look at Arkansas Pine Bluff, they're plus 10 yards per game. So I'm liking this here. You see the average game grade is clearly on your side. And you've got a team. Now, we did lose to Arkansas Pine Bluff last year, but we've got our quarterback back in Glass. Glass had a 32-11 ratio last year, 13-3 this year. Last year, they split quarterback duties. Skylar Perry took over, or was in there along with Shannon Patrick. Patrick was the better one of the two. Perry's their quarterback this year. Haven't been quite as explosive in the run game. So add it all up, you've got the team that's got the much higher yards per game. They beat a quality Jackson State on the road. These guys did beat Grambling State on the road, by the way, so that was good. But I'm actually going to go with Alabama A&M. They're plus points in this one, plus 3. Take Alabama A&M plus 3 over Arkansas Pine Bluff. So your two official plays this week, Jacksonville State and Alabama A&M. And one thing I want to mention, if you want to get in on the FCS for the playoffs, just the FCS pass, it's $9. It's $20 off with the code playoffs21. Just go to the store and get that. And as mentioned, we're hard at work on the magazine right now, guys. You can go to philsteele.com right now. And when you go to the store at philsteele.com, you can order the preview. You get one of them, and these are shipped out FedEx, by the way. 2-day FedEx, $19.95 plus the 2-day FedEx, which I think is $7.50. It's $27.45 then. And when you do order the one, you get it 2 days after we get it back in the office. We're sending the final page to the press June 15th. We're going to have it back in the office on June 23rd. They're shipping out same day. So you'll get the magazine by like June 25th, before July 4th, and before they hit the newsstand. So if you want to be the first in the country to get them, get it there. But your best bet's a double deal, because the shipping is the same. It's $7.50. So why not get 2 magazines for the price of 1? Plus, actually, you get it for less than the price of 1, because 2 magazines would be $39.90, and here they're $37.25. So you get a discount on the second magazine, and you only pay for shipping once. So get the double deal. It's your best bet, and it's right there at the philsteele.com store. All right, well, hopefully we have a winning week in the FCS. I'm interviewing coaches this week, watching spring games. We're in the third right-through process of the magazine, dotting I's, crossing teams, doing all conference teams, putting all those angles in on the pages, getting all the right-hand pages ready. A lot of stuff to get ready for you for the magazine to get this thing out by June 15th. And as always, thanks for taking the Phil Steele Plus tour with me today.